Anthony Richardson will be a top 5 quarterback. Bijan Robinson will overtake Christian McCaffrey as RB1, and Puka Nacua is going to even be more dominant in his second season. Do we actually believe these takes, or is it just April Fools? Find out on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am one of your hosts, Michelle Magdziuk. When I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst at NFL.com. Vinny is not here today, but I'm joined by my lovely wife, Kate Magdziuk. She's the co-host of Locked On Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast and also the fantasy analyst at PFF and Yahoo. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, Kate, we have a fun episode today. So we are going to discuss 3 very, very spicy takes. And we'll let you know. We'll let the listeners know if we believe it's the truth or it's just an April Fool's joke. Let's start with this top one. Pretty spicy here. Anthony Richardson will be a top 5 fantasy quarterback in 2024. Do you believe this, Kate?
I don't believe this, but let me tell you, it's not necessarily because the data doesn't back up this take. Actually, the data is full steam ahead, all on board with this take, but I do have some health concerns, which we will get to. But first, let's talk about what he actually did when he was on the field. Obviously, we got a very small window where we got to actually evaluate Anthony Richardson from a fantasy perspective. Had a concussion, suffered in week 2, ended up having a shoulder injury that ended his season in week 5. And so that gave us a 4-game sample size. And you know what? He was pretty darn productive while he was on the football field. He was a top 4 quarterback in both of the games that he started and finished. The issue, though, is he didn't get to start and finish many football games.
That is a key issue here, right? And this question is Anthony Richardson will be a top 5 fantasy quarterback, right? Instead of can he be? Can he be?
Mm-hmm.
I think we'd both agree he has that upside, right? I mean, he averaged 18 fantasy points per game in the 4 games he played, and he barely played in 2 of those games. I mean, he played 1 quarter in 2 of those games. So it's wild how well he performed in fantasy when you're considering literally had no time to do anything. He was on pace for 578 rushing yards last year. Again, he barely played in 2 of the games. So in the 2 full games he did play, his 17-game pace was on pace for 816 rushing yards. If he does that, if he stays healthy, if he puts up 500, 600, 700, 800 yards, he will very likely be a top 5 fantasy quarterback. So last season, there was 4 quarterbacks that had 500 or more rushing yards last year. It was Josh Allen, who was quarterback 1, Jalen Hurts, who finished as quarterback 2, Lamar Jackson finished as quarterback 3, and then Justin Fields, he was quarterback 13 in fantasy points per game. So I think like last year's Justin Fields kind of shows you the floor of Anthony Richardson, but then you see the upside with your Allens and your Hurts and your Jacksons. The biggest question here is, can he stay healthy? And I don't think we can give an answer for that, right? 2 injuries immediately. But I mean, look at how worried we were about Tua coming into this year, and he stayed healthy all season long.
I do think what kind of gives a little bit of credence to the more hesitation that I have with a guy like Anthony Richardson is that I do think some of it has to do with play style, being a little bit reckless and generally putting yourself in harm's way. And, the injuries didn't just occur, coming out as, an NFL player. He had some injury history in college too. Only played 1 full season, ended up having a season-ending knee injury, has had a couple of concussions. Like, there's a few reasons why you look at his play style as more of a rushing threat Obviously, he's got a really big body, but it doesn't seem to have the kind of durability that maybe you would expect given his size. Like Kyler Murray, with his play style coming out of college, you saw his frame, small stature, and you thought that was going to put him at greater risk to sustain injuries taking some of these big hits. But like it's really, you look at Anthony Richardson, I think he's put those concerns on display much more predominantly than a guy like Kyler Murray, even despite his size.
I do love his weapons, though. I'll say that. So let's
Yeah.
say he stays healthy for the majority of the season. We know he has the mobility and the rushing upside to be a top 5 quarterback. And then he also has the weapons in the passing game with Michael Pittman Jr., who they just re-signed. Josh Downs coming into his second year. I like him as a deep threat. Like, I think Josh Downs can be a pretty solid wide receiver, too. You still have Alec Pierce there, another deep threat. Jonathan Taylor should help out to take off some pressure from him in the run game. And then also, there's a solid possibility that a really good weapon is sitting there for them in the first round. Maybe Brock Bowers. Like, he keeps falling in drafts. At first, to start this offseason, you would say he's never going to last to number 15 to the Colts. But it seems like that's a very strong possibility now. And I think that's the one piece missing in this Colts offense is a great tight end like a Brock Bowers. I think that would really solidify me feeling much better about the chances of Richardson being a top 5 quarterback is if he has another big body that he can throw to in the red zone, end zone, because even Michael Pittman Jr., he's like his biggest guy out there, right? But Pittman has never really scored touchdowns throughout his career. So that would be my biggest worry is where are the passing touchdowns going to come from? But we know the rushing and rushing touchdowns are going to be there. All that to say, will he be a top 5 fantasy quarterback? I'm probably calling it April Fools here, but he definitely has the upside.
Well, and let me say, like, I don't want to just pile on the negatives with Anthony Richardson. I know I've kind of harped on his health status, but let me just give like some context as to why I do think it could be very much. Michelle, you highlighted all of his abilities as a rusher. I'd like to acknowledge the fact that he led all quarterbacks with at least 50 or more pass attempts in fantasy points per dropback, despite ranking 53rd among 58 qualifying quarterbacks in accurate throw percentage per PFF. That only ranked ahead of Taylor Heineke, Josh Dobbs, Bailey Zappi, PJ Walker, and Andy Dalton. Among
Very
48
tiny sample size. Very tiny sample size.
very tiny sample size, but like generally speaking, you weren't necessarily drafting Anthony Richardson for his arm, right? And I do think that generally translated. I think everybody knew he was going to be more of a developing passer. You knew he had all the tools, he had the arm strength, he had the physicality, he had the athleticism, but he needed to put it all together in order to fully develop as a passer. And he wasn't even there yet and still led all quarterbacks in fantasy points per dropback. I just think that shows you, like, if he takes strides as a passer, I mean, yeah, he's going to be a top 5 quarterback year in and year out. He just needs to stay on the field and take care of his body.
What I do love about his ability, like the chances of him developing as a quarterback, is his coach, Shane Steichen, being there. I mean, he developed Jalen Hurts into a much better passing quarterback. Justin Herbert coming out of Oregon was a very inconsistent, accurate passer, right? That was one of his downfalls. And then I think still to this day, maybe Justin Herbert had his best season as a rookie with Steichen, right? I don't know if it's ever gotten better than that season. So I love his coach here. The more I talk about it, the more I just want to say he'll be a top 5 guy, but I'm going to stick to his April Fools. He'll be outside of that, but he definitely has the upside to be top 5. We're going to get into our next spicy take. And you know what? It's our boy Bijan Robinson. I want to talk about him. But the spicy take is, can he compete with Christian McCaffrey to be the RB1? I think he might. The sports calendar is loaded, and FanDuel's making it even more exciting to get in on the action, because right now new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on March Madness, MLB, NBA, NHL, and so much more. We have a super exciting matchup tonight. LSU versus Iowa in the Women's March Madness Elite 8. I love Iowa with a -1.5 point spread on FanDuel. That means if you place a bet on Iowa's spread, they have to win by 2 points. And I trust the GOAT of Caitlin Clark to get it done tonight. Kate and I are both wearing Caitlin Clark shirts today. So excited. So again, that's Iowa minus 1.5 point spread on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Spicy hot take number 2. Bijan Robinson will contend for the #1 running back overall scorer in 2024. This is a hard one because he has to compete with the dude, Christian McCaffrey, who just scores touchdowns nonstop and is amazing. Is this April Fool's, or do you believe it could be true?
I think this is true. I am all in on Bijan
Woo! I did
Robinson
not
as
think you were going to go that way. I'm very excited.
really okay. You sent me the show sheet for today. We saw the spicy takes. I read them and I was like, are these supposed to be spicy? Like Bijan Robinson RB1? I don't think that's all that spicy. But I mean, let's look at his rookie season, which by all accounts, generally disappointing, right? Maybe not as much disappointing as I would say like frustrating because the talent, the prospect. And he came out and they were running Cordero Patterson and Tyler Algier at the goal line. It was absolutely maddening to watch. But all things considered, like it ranked 9th in terms of snap share, 15 in rushing yards, 4th in receiving yards among running backs. I feel like that was kind of an underrated aspect of his game in his rookie season. Led all running backs in terms of routes run, ranked 3rd in total target share, 9th in yards per touch. I do think there's a lot of things to like about Bijan Robinson's game as a rookie, despite the madness that was Arthur Smith. Now, the good news is, despite all of the ups and downs, the Falcons ranked 23rd in the league with 155 red zone plays. They ran the 5th fewest goal line plays in the league. That was only behind the Titans, Giants, Patriots, and Jets. That's right, Michelle. They ran fewer goal line plays than the Pittsburgh Steelers last year. Didn't think that was possible. So, yeah, you have now Kirk Cousins coming into this offense. You have a new offensive scheme. I'll take all of the successes that Robinson had on the field in year 1. And I think we're going to see that tenfold when we actually get the offense starting to move and groove.
I mean, 1,463 yards, scrimmage yards as a rookie, and we're acting like it was a terrible season, right? And it was for fantasy. It was not at all what we expected. And the reason for that is 4 rushing touchdowns. Like, that's the biggest issue. And you brought it up. The opportunities weren't there. And when they were there, they'd give them to Algier or Patterson because listen to this. This is just the funniest stat to me. Bijan Robinson had 3 carries inside the 5-yard line last year. 3. He scored
3.
2 of them. 3.
That's only 3 more than I had. 3
Just
more
to
than I had.
I want to compare that to someone. Gus Edwards had 23 such carries, and Bijan Robinson had 3. Craig Reynolds and Rico Dowdle, 4 carries each. So Craig Reynolds had more carries inside the 5-yard line than Bijan Robinson. He had more goal line opportunities. That is insane. And this is the biggest reason I feel like Arthur Smith got fired, because this is just so stupid. That's the stupidest stat of all time. Bijan Robinson is a big bag. He knows how to score. Get him the freaking ball near the goal line. That's insane to me. Insane.
Well, and like Craig Reynolds specifically, it's even stupider when you remember the fact that Craig Reynolds was playing behind, I don't know, little guy, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, the ultimate touchdown sniper. So when he's ranking 3rd in that metric on his own team and he still has more carries than Bijan Robinson inside the 5, something's gone terribly, terribly wrong. Now,
Latavius Murray had 12 carries inside the 5. That's
stop.
4 times. That's 4 times the amount of Bijan Robinson.
Stop. No.
I
feel
so
like
right there off the bat, Bijan Robinson's going to get more carries. Not only just because hopefully Zach Robinson is smarter than Arthur Smith just right off the bat and gives him the carries when they get down there, but also because Kirk Cousins is there and there should be more scoring opportunities. Like you brought up, they struggled to get into the red zone all that much or the goal line areas. So just off the bat, he should have more rushing touchdowns immediately, which will allow for more fantasy points. I will say also he needs more touches, right? Tyler Algier stole way too many touches last year, but he did have 12 games with at least 15 touches. He averaged 18.1 fantasy points per game in those 12 games. That would have been great last year. We would have been happy with that, right? Still not even close to Christian McCaffrey, though, who averaged 24.5 fantasy points per game on the season. So still a long way to go to reach to McCaffrey, even with more touches. But I will say Bijan, even with those games with 15 plus touches, it never was like the amount of touches that Christian McCaffrey got on a daily basis. So just bringing it down to 15 to 19 touches, that was 9 games that Bijan had. He averaged 18.6 fantasy points per game. Christian McCaffrey only had 4 of those games last year. He averaged 20.5 fantasy points per game in those games. So a closer margin there in those games with 15 to 19 touches. I think the biggest issue with saying that Bijan can catch up to Christian McCaffrey as a number 1 running back is, will Christian McCaffrey come back down to life, right, in his 8th season? I think that's the bigger question to ask here.
I think that's probably the biggest hang up for me. Obviously, you have guys like Derrick Henry who just never seem to touch the test of time, like just completely defy all of the rules that apply to aging running backs. But we are getting to the point where obviously Christian McCaffrey is not your average running back. But if he were, this would be around the time that you start to question, do we start to see a decline in that efficiency? Now, luckily, Kyle Shanahan's offense, I think, does him a world of favor in terms of limiting some of those drops in efficiency. Obviously, scoring opportunities are going to be very plentiful, so I'm not necessarily expecting a huge drop there. But like, if he's human, which he is not, this would be around the time where we start to get a little bit nervous, get a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, per fantasy points, the site fantasy points, the 8th year for running backs is really the start of the huge drop off for running backs in terms of like their average fantasy points throughout their career at that point, and then what happens in their 8th year. That's like really the start of the decline for running backs. While year 2, which Bijan's going into, is typically the best fantasy season on average for running backs throughout their entire career. So you like that, and then also like, if anyone's going to compete with Christian McCaffrey, it has to be a guy that's going to get a ton of targets. And it is wild to see that he had 86 targets last year on a team that did not throw the ball very often. And you're moving on to Kirk Cousins now, so you would expect them to throw the ball so much more. And yeah, they added Darnell Mooney, but that's it, right? And I don't think Darnell Mooney is going to come in and just take all these targets away. If anything, Bijan's targets could even increase next year. And if that gets close to 100 targets with the rushing attempts he should get, with the increase of rushing touchdowns he should get, he will definitely be competing for the number 1 spot. It's just, is Christian McCaffrey still this absurd Christian McCaffrey putting up 25 points per game? Because that's a really hard mark to get to no matter how good of a running back you are.
For sure. And I think, again, we're just looking at, when do we start to see that decline? Christian McCaffrey ranks 6th in terms of active running backs in the league right now, with over 1,800 touches throughout his career, which that's a lot of miles on the tires. Obviously, we're going to have to see a big leap from Bijan in terms of, his overall production, but he's got all the tools to do it. He's got a good offensive line. He's finally got a good quarterback, which I think should be really great for his efficiency. And we know he was a really good prospect. He's an outstanding athlete. He's everything that you could possibly want in a running back, and then some. I think this might be the year we see the tides change.
We have one more spicy take. Will Puka Nacua be a top 5 fantasy wide receiver in 2024? To end the show, we'll discuss if we think that's April Fool's or the truth. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? Read a book, go out to dinner, get a workout in. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. I personally utilize online therapy over the past few years, and it's helped me so much with my anxiety and irritability. I honestly cannot say enough good things about my experience with my therapist and just online therapy in general. I truly believe that everyone could benefit by going to therapy. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you don't have to stress because you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Puka Nacua will be a top 5 fantasy wide receiver in 2024. Kate, April Fools are the truth. He finished at number 8 last year. So that we're saying he's going to get even better than his rookie season.
This is the truth, Michelle. I honestly believe that. And I honestly don't know that we'd even be asking ourselves the question if it weren't for Puka Nakua's 5th-round draft capital. I mean, from a target situation, 160 targets. Obviously, you had some health concerns there from Cooper Kupp, but Cooper Kupp, another year older, he's going to be 31 years old in the month of June. But like dating back to 2010, I want to put like some massive context on Puka Nakua's rookie season. Among rookie wide receivers who had at least 50 or more targets in their rookie season, Puka Nakua's 89.3 PFF receiving grade ranks 3rd highest dating back to 2010. That's only behind Odell Beckham Jr. and Justin Jefferson. 45 explosive plays, ranked only behind Jamar Chase's 49 as a rookie. 2.67 yards per route run. That was the 2nd most by a rookie wide receiver in that span. 5th highest target rate on routes run. That was all with Cooper Kupp, a younger Cooper Kupp than we're about to see here in 2024. I think that I'm struggling to come up with reasons why we're not going to see Cooper Kupp Cooper Kupp maybe continue to take sort of a little bit of a step back in terms of overall involvement in the offense. Puka Nacua is going to be a feature in this offense. You have a quarterback that knows how to deliver an accurate football. This team has shown no terms of slowdown in terms of ability to score points. Like, what is the question mark about Puka Nacua? Why are we asking? Because he already almost accomplished this feat as a rookie.
I'm
What am I
calling it
missing?
April Fools. I don't think it's going to happen. I call April Fools here. It's not because he's not good. It's not because he's not going to be good next year. I just don't know if it gets. I think last year he's in a perfect situation, right? You had Cooper Kupp miss the first 4 weeks, 15 targets, 20 targets, 7 and 10. And you did see those targets decline once Cooper Kupp came back. Not in week 5, he still was at 11 targets, had a good game with Cooper Kupp in his first week back. But I do think Cooper Kupp was never truly fully healthy last year. And we'll see if he continues to decline. 31, yeah, that is getting up there in age, but I still think he's going to be heavily involved in this offense. I don't know if Nacua will get 160 targets again with Cooper Kupp here. And then also, if Kupp is aging, the team's going to see that. And this is such a stacked draft class. Maybe they use some of their earlier picks or an earlier pick on a wide receiver. We'll see there. But like I brought up, those first 4 games, I mean, he just was a stinking beast. And there was other games throughout the year he was a beast, but there's also games. This was a stretch in his time. 26 yards, 154, awesome. 43, 32, 70, 27. He had another 105, 84, 50. Now, in 1.5 of those games was Brett Ripien, so you can't hold that against him. But that middle of the season, I mean, that was a huge letdown after what he did with Cooper Kupp, or without Cooper Kupp to start the year. And if he doesn't come back in week 16 and 17 and put up that 164 game and 118 yard game, I don't think anyone is actually that high. That high. But I don't think people are thinking of him as a 1st-round fantasy wide receiver coming into this year. Now, you can't just take those games away from him. They happen. And what he did in his rookie season is absolutely amazing. I do expect him to have a good fantasy season, but not top 5. And when I'm looking at the top wide receivers average draft position and like who I think will do what, I can't put him over CeeDee Lamb or Tyreek Hill or Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then he's kind of with the next group, which is a bunch of people. So those 5, I definitely can't put him over. So already I don't have him top 5. But then it's hard to decide, is it AJ Brown or Puka? Is it like even Marvin Harrison Jr. if he lands with the Cardinals? That would be a real, I might go Marvin Harrison Jr. over Puka Nacua. But I just think it gets harder to say top 5. Top 10 would be much easier to say, yes, that will happen. But top 5, I think that's too rich for me for this upcoming year.
I'm going to make the argument that your hope when you draft Marvin Harrison Jr. over Puka Nacua is that you get Puka Nacua stats. Like, I genuinely don't.
Receiving yards, yes, but not 6 receiving touchdowns.
I genuinely do not believe that if Puka Nacua had not been drafted in the 5th round, that we'd be even having this discussion. Like, I genuinely believe that.
So you're
this
not
is
worried
it.
about the middle of the year at all?
No.
Okay.
I'm just not. Like, I'm just not. Like, there are a lot of top receivers that we've seen ups and downs from, obviously going to produce more when he's literally the only viable target on the field. But I also believe that, like, you look at his statistical production, you look at just even the tape, like, it doesn't really matter what you're looking at. I think he's done enough to earn an increased role. I think obviously they're going to have to start looking toward the future here with an aging Cooper Kupp. I think Puka Nacua is the future. Like, just because he's drafted in the late rounds doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily need to, like, find other options. Like, I think Puka Nacua is the wide receiver 1 for this team moving forward. And again, if he had been a first round prospect and posted the season that he did, we wouldn't even be asking the question if he's going to finish top 5. It would be a given. I think you're
I don't
being
know.
draft capitalists or
I'm really not, because I think he's going to be really good. I just don't think top 5. I mean, even if
maybe
you
we're
just
splitting hairs then, because it, like, would you make the argument that he's going to be drafted or that he's going to finish top 7?
No, I'd say top 10. I wouldn't say top 7. This is my issue, is that so many of those points came in through weeks 1 through 4 without Cooper Kupp there. And then if you just took the time without, still really, really good numbers, but it's not, it
He
wouldn't
was
be
a
as,
rookie.
I get it. But
And guess
I
what?
just,
Like, so you know what?
I guess
I
I don't
think
see the complete downfall of Cooper Kupp like others do. And Cooper Kupp is that guy for Matthew Stafford, especially in the red zone. If Puka had 6 touchdowns, you want to see a lot more than that to feel comfortable, because is he going to be as efficient? Is he going to get 160 targets? I don't know. Like, is he going to be able to put up another 15 or 1486 receiving yard year? We need more touchdowns than the 6. And that also gives him more upside, right? He finished as a wide receiver 8 with only 6 receiving touchdowns. So you could use that argument against me. I just think there's more weapons there to be worried about than there are. Like, let's say Marvin Harrison Jr. goes to the Cardinals. I do just think the opportunity there to even get more than 160 targets, to get the same amount of receiving yards, but then to also get those receiving touchdowns are just higher.
I'm gonna say, like, for the mid season lull, I'm gonna give you the counter argument that, like, maybe this is actually kind of a good thing for Puka Nacua. Maybe we saw him come out, absolutely destroy, obviously, in the absence of Cooper Kupp. Nobody really expected Puka Nacua to come on the scenes, but Cooper Kupp comes back. We see a slight dip in target share, and then we see maybe defenses catch on a little bit. Then all of a sudden, at the end of the season, we see him reemerge. Like, could that not be a sign that, like, okay, so defenses made some adjustments toward Puka Nacua and he adjusted back? Like, I feel like your projection is just a completely stagnant one. Like,
But I just think so. In the first
you're projecting
7,
no growth for this wide receiver that already
I'm worried
showed
about his
us.
target share with Cooper Kupp. In the first 7 weeks, he had double-digit targets in 5 of the first 7 weeks. 5 of the first 7 weeks. The rest of the year, he had 1 more game with double-digit targets, and it's not like he had a bunch of not. It was 7, 7, 7, 8, 7, 9, 8, and that was the 11. The one that he had 8, 6. Like, the target share went way, way down.
Okay.
And if Cooper Kupp continues to age and continues to deal with injuries, then sure, maybe his target share. But I just think it's going to be closer to the 7 to 8 targets per game that we saw for nearly the whole second half of the season, once Kupp was fully back to health, or back to as much health as he was going to get to last year, instead of what we saw to start the year.
I think it's fair. I would love for your audience to weigh in. Where are you falling with Puka Nacua? Because clearly we are not going to come to any sort of agreement
No,
here in
I'm
the
saying April
days,
Fools. You're saying the
months.
truth.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay.
Happy
Anyways,
April Fools, everybody.
that is it for today's show. Thank you to all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every dayers, Kate and I will be back tomorrow to discuss second-year running backs. I promise it won't all just be about Bijan Robinson. We got a lot of other guys to discuss. Don't miss it. Bye, y'all.